Today I want to break down a quote from the great Stoic Marcus Aurelius. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacles to our acting. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Now, I love this quote because not only because it comes from Marcus Aurelius, and of course, as you would know from my previous book review of his Meditations, this quote comes from the Meditations. I love him so much because, again, that whole book and all of his musings, if you will, were just his own personal thoughts that he wrote without any expectation of anybody reading. This was just something to keep him going. But to break down the quote, I think it's three sentences, but we got to break it down into three parts. So first part being the mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. So obviously when you have what I think this means, and keep in mind, like I don't have a philosophy degree. I'm no professor of this. This is just like a regular guy trying to break this down and to make sense of it. That first part, I think it really speaks to the plasticity of everybody's mind and how fluid and how malleable it can be, because essentially when we're trying to accomplish a task or when we're trying to live, obviously there's going to be obstacles in our way. However, the mind will come up with something, and it almost needs an obstacle in order to switch on, if that makes sense, in order to become that fluid substance, if you will, that can, get rid of the obstacle. The second part as well, the impediment to action advances action. Of course, this sort of builds onto the second part where, obviously, imagine you're driving down on a road and you're just going down, listening to your music, drinking your coffee, smoking your cigarette, whatever the hell it is you do when you're on your road trip. And all of a sudden there is a obstacle in the way. Let's say it could be somebody with a flat tire who's blocking the road. It could be, a fallen tree. It could be something or other. Now, there's an obvious impediment to your action, which is driving your car down the road and to try to get to your destination. And because there's an impediment there's something that's stopping you from going to your goal. You're almost snapped into action to say, okay, well, I need to clear this obstacle, because if I don't take care of this right now, I can't get to where I'm going. So using the example of the car and you driving on the road and there's an obstacle, you would get out of your car and try to help buddy with his tire, or you would call somebody and say, hey, listen, we need to move this tree out of the road or something, or whatever it is. But essentially I like that second part as well, because again, it builds off of the first part where again, your mind is now engaged. Okay, it's become this fluid, malleable substance that is now spurred into action because there's an impediment in front of you. And this is completely unscripted as well. I'm sort of me just rambling about the quote, but I think what it speaks to as well is that the mind itself almost has to be prodded, and it has to have some sort of an obstacle in order to be fully engaged, in order to flex its muscles, in order to live, right? And this sort of builds into the third part of the quote, which is what stands in the way becomes the way. What I take from this anyway is that there is this because the mind almost needs this constant opposition, and it always needs a problem to solve. It always needs something to do, for lack of a better word. Then essentially that obstacle, when he says what stands in the way becomes the way, it's that, okay, well, this is essentially, no matter what obstacle is in your path, it doesn't matter if it's a tree, a car, something else in your personal life or whatever, that essentially becomes the way that you have to live. You always have to, you essentially have to keep fighting and keep clearing as many obstacles as you can. And it almost seems as though the mind will never run out of obstacles. The way that I take it as well is that if you don't go out and challenge yourself, you're probably not going to, the mind will create an obstacle in order for it to overcome. It's a very type of overcoming mechanism. I'm not sure if I'm articulating this properly, but what I get from this whole quote is that, again, the mind is a very powerful, very malleable, very fluid problem-solving tool. And when it's presented with an obstacle, it's prodded into action, and it operates as it should, which is to solve the problem. And then, of course, by doing that, that's the way that we should live, in the sort of sense where we should constantly seek obstacles to clear out, perhaps not just for ourselves, but for those around us as well. So anyway, that's my little thought and quote analysis for the day. Let me know if I've missed the mark down in the comments, because again, like I said, I'm no professional when it comes to this. This is just my interpretation of the quote. But feel free to drop a like on the video and a comment down below to share your thoughts. And as always, thank you so much for watching.